you that signed up to watch this later. Hello, if you're watching the recording, welcome. Um, I might just, if you can make me bigger, that might work well for everyone, Emily, especially when I share my screen. Awesome. Thank you. All right, legends. Thank you so much for turning up to this today. We've had like over 500 of you want this information. So, firstly, just honoring that you've made it here, either live today or that you've made space to listen to this, and really honoring the why. Why have you turned up today? So, really, just want to invite you, if you can, if you've got a moment. I know so many of you will be here with children. But just to actually see if you can close your eyes, or perhaps if you want to speak it out loud or journal it, write it in. You might even want to write it in the chat. What was your motivation for being here today? What made you want to click and be here? What made you want to listen to this information? What has driven you to be here today? And as you think about that, I just really, really want to say that everything that we do here at Core and Flow Restore, for some of you, this will be the first interaction with us. For others, you would have been here for the last 5 years. But everything that we do here is an invitation. And what that means is if I say something and it lands in your body and it feels really good here, then take it. Take it with you. If it doesn't land and you're like, then throw it away and give it no more of your space, because your space is limited, your capacity is limited. So please only take what feels right today. We are going to be digging a little bit deep into some things that we may be holding. This is a really, I want to say, complex topic around how we move our bodies, why we move our bodies, why we don't move our bodies, and why we don't self-care. So I want to send a lot of love to anyone that may feel a little bit ouchy with some of the stuff that we look at today or talk about. I want to send lots of love to those tender parts. And please know that you can always reach out. I've made it sound super scary. It's not going to be at all. But if it does feel a bit ouchy, just sending you lots of love. Also, an invitation, I can see some of you are already doing it, is to actually move throughout today's session. So it's very unlike Core and Floor to tell us to sit still. So if you want to go for a walk as you're listening to this, or be on the ground and using your roller or something like that, please let me know. Don't let me know. Just do it. I'm thinking of something else then at the same time. Please just move your body as you need to. Get your roller out. Do some squats as we're listening. Hopefully some of the team will be joining us at the end of this, and we're going to try and do a 5-minute is better than no minutes session. But we'll see if that works out or not. Okay, so the first question I wanted to address today and look at is the belief systems that we had around exercise growing up. So this this is a conversation, and there are lots of you on the chat. There's 28 of us in this space already. And so it works really well if we want to share. You don't have to share anything if you don't want to. And you can just send things privately as well if you want to share anonymously. But you may want to, and we'll pop these questions up in the recording so you can come back to them and dive in deeper. But if you'd like to answer them, I would love to hear from some of you. So our first question is, how did you feel about, I'm just going to get that person muted if that's right, Emily. Thanks. How did you feel about exercise growing up? So thinking back to when you were younger, when you were a child, and you might want to stagger this question as to like little you. So thinking like 5 to 8-year-old you, and then you might do like 8 to 12-year-old. Leave teenager you for a little bit. We'll just do like that younger version of us first. But really thinking about, how did you move your body and how did you feel about movement as a kid? So as a young child, was it something that you did just to find joy? So Melanie said, I loved it. Yeah. Was it something that you didn't even think about? Was it that your mind and body were just beautifully connected and you moved about your environment in a way that felt good? Yeah, it was fun, right? Didn't think about it at all. Yeah. So that beautiful connection with with your space. So we were very active just in everyday life as well as some organized sport. It was definitely a positive thing. Beautiful. Yeah. So just knowing that for some of you that this may be the case and for others it may not. But thinking back, so first memory about movement is always being told I was too frail. Beautiful, Victoria. So what we start to see here for you is that a story has been given to you. Yeah, and sometimes this can really play out for many of us. If our parents held a lot of fear around movement, for example, be careful, don't do that. That's too dangerous. You know, those kind of comments from a really early age, particularly, that's too high, that you're not old enough to do that. Those kind of comments can really start to shift. So if you think about when we first start moving, it's typically very joyous for the family when we start to crawl, squat, stand, and walk. You think about your first baby, the excitement around, oh, you're moving, you're moving. And then perhaps even for some of us, we can think about how we've parented our children. Perhaps it was scary for us to watch our children move. And often that fear is very ancestral. That fear can really be carried throughout our lineage. Knowing that most of us, especially if we're here in Australia or your family has migrated to a country at some point, which many of us have done, that is moving for safety, right? So if you're Aboriginal in Australia, movement was always for safety and to find different areas that felt right, and people were able to move with the seasons to support the tribe. And then if we moved here from other countries, we moved for safety. And so there can be lots of entanglement around this piece for us that's deeply ancestral. So really want to highlight that. I want to send little Victoria a lot of love around that too frail piece. And I wonder how that's playing out for you now. Maybe it's not, maybe it is, maybe it was something you shifted. But these kind of ability to understand that it's much more than can't be bothered or I'm lazy or just don't like that movement. There can be a lot more deeper stuff for some of us, not all of us. Yes, sometimes not being able to keep up with my older brothers and a bit of fear of being left behind when out exploring. Yeah, huge piece, right? So for a little child, that's really, really big. And I watch that even in my two children. They're 4 years apart, and the little one's got this, I can't keep up, so carry me story. And the older one's like, I must be ahead all the time. And so we can see how that sibling order can really impact us too. So inviting you to think about if there was joy, if you can really feel that joy that was there around movement and fun, perhaps that was there or wasn't. If it was there for you, inviting you to think about, did it ever shift? Is movement still fun and joy for you? Or did it shift in childhood? And for some of us, it may have shifted around when we entered school or when we entered sport. So really seeing that as part of school, there was specified sport classes, and that can be really competitive. We are very, very competitive in Australia. I'm speaking particularly with sport. It's a huge part of our culture, and winning is a huge part of our culture, being the best. And so, yeah, so Fun said my primary school PE teacher gave me the feeling I wasn't good at sports. Yeah, and so for many, that school um, in, experience around sports can be the place where things really shifted, where we started to think, I'm not good enough to move my body. Or perhaps when we entered out of school sport and we were told we weren't good enough or we didn't make the team, or, it didn't feel right for us. So not at all shifted when I got told I was being judged about my body. Yeah. So that's the other really, really big piece here with movement is the connection to aesthetics, how our body looks for others, and so much of that, especially for us, those of us that are girls and women, grew up with our worth being wrapped up in our appearance. So if some of us would have had that real good girl or good boy trait, many of us have that. And so if we're not good at something, then you don't do it. Can very much play out when it comes to sport. Or if you are good at something, you must be the absolute best. And so this is where exercise can shift from a place of joy to a place of competition and fear. And so we can actually build a lot of fear around it. So I'm speaking to a big group here today, knowing that more people will watch this in the future. So what I throw out may be really land with you and you're like, that was me. And then other things you'll be like, no, it's not. So knowing that we are all very unique in this and our stories are going to be unique. So just inviting you to really just think about you and what felt right for you in it. Um, so yeah, if you weren't good, and I really, really want to put good in inverted these. I get my words out today. Because whose definition of good is it? And typically it's about being able to win as opposed to did you just love it and did your eyes shine bright when you were playing that sport or doing that activity, regardless of how good you were at it or not. And this is where that good piece can really destroy our love of exercise and movement because maybe perhaps you absolutely loved being part of that team or you absolutely loved that sport, but then you were told you weren't good at it or you didn't get picked, and then your love for that dies. And then sometimes a big fear builds around trying other things. So Leah, affordability of the extracurricular activities really impacted access to the movement I was interested in. Yeah, I really see you in that, Leah. And for me, my parents worked 7 days a week. They owned a shop when I was younger. And so there was no space, there was no one to take me. And so that really impacted too. So affordability and time, and how that can really then play out because then that part of our life isn't no longer exists. So sending a lot of love to little Leah who experienced that as well. Um, so really inviting you to see here along your timeline, that childhood timeline, was there a point in time where movement for pure expression, right? For pure need, that beautiful mind body oneness where the mind and body move and connect and meet each other's needs equally, did that cease for you? And then I want to invite you to look at really those teenage years and then moving into adult life. How, sorry, before we do that, thinking about, staying in that younger time frame still. So from child to like just adolescence and maybe moving into those adolescent years a little bit. I really want to invite you to think about how that adults in your life moved, right? So your parents, aunts, uncles, grandparents, older siblings, if you had older siblings, how did the older people in your life model movement to you? So what was their relationship like with exercise? So was it something that was expressed as something that people did to find joy, to feel joy, to meet their own needs? Was it that was talked about in terms of something they did to feel more connected to themselves? Was there a dialogue around what they did and why? So was there discussion around, mum's going to go for a walk because it makes me feel really good in my body. Or perhaps was it connected to mum's really stressed, so she's going for a walk in her body, knowing there's no right or wrong here, but just starting to see if you can see more threads appearing here. So Laura said weight loss was always the goal. And Victoria has said zero movement, parents in survival mode. Very much a story of our family doesn't do or like sports. Yeah, there can be a whole story that the family holds collectively, even if the children don't align to it. So often when people come to work with me one-on-one, people will say things like, I'm an anxious person, or I don't do sports, or I like to control everything. People will say a comment about themselves. And one of my first questions is always, who gave you that sentence or who gave you that definition? Sometimes it's one we give ourselves. Sometimes it's one somebody else has given us. And this is really important that we unpack these and go, is it true? is it something that I want to be true? And then if it's not, how do I start to shift it? Knowing that our family of origin can really, really shape who we externally are, but perhaps who we're not internally. We've never had that safety to internally be who we want to be. And expression, which is movement a lot of the time, is a big part of that. Um, I recall my grandmother talking about sports as a way to meet friends when you moved locations. They moved around a lot. So that beautiful connection with others, I love that you can recall that. Exercise was work with the aim of weight loss or strength. Mum was the only active person, and it was hard one time that she fiercely protected. Yeah, so she had to earn it and then she protected it, is what I'm hearing, Poppy. I may have interpreted that wrong. So really inviting you here to go, perhaps, was there, so for me, my dad moved for joy and connection with others. He played golf, and that was his time, and it was really the whole family respected that. My mum only ever moved for weight loss, and it was never good enough. The exercise was never good enough because it never helped her lose as much weight as she had wanted to. And it was something that she really, it was a chore. She really had to fit in, and she never got as much time as dad got. Dad would get a whole Sunday and never saw my mum. It was something that had to be slotted in really fast and hard. And it went together with the grapefruit diet, which, if any of you have done the Modern Mum Village, you know I'm still traumatized by the grapefruit diet. So yeah, lots of you have already brought up the weight loss thing as well. And thinking about it here, was it modeled to you in a really gendered way? Some of you it will have been, some of you it won't have been. Perhaps it was your mum that moved and your dad that didn't. If you had mum and dad together, really thinking about your own unique family situations here, and what did it actually look like? Um, and then thinking about not just our real humans in our life, but all the other impacts we had. So, what TV shows did you watch? What magazines were you exposed to? So, for me, I think of Dolly, Cleo, and what was on the cover of those, right? So, it was always about exercises to tone up, shape up, do these 6 exercises and you'll get abs of steel, or the best bikini body, or these glutes that'll have him turned on. It depends on if you did Chloe or Dolly. Cleo, it was Cleo, wasn't it? Was much more sexually orientated. So really this whole messaging about you do this to get this to please this person. None of it around if you move like this, it's going to feel great for you, or, any of those kind of messages. I think about Home and Away and Neighbours. That was what I was exposed to massively growing up. I watched it every single night. And I probably connected more to those TV shows than my parents. In a way, they were my role models, and they were the messages that I really attached to in terms of how to connect to my body, how to connect in relationships, and where my worth was. And I remember Super growing up. If you wanted to work at Super, you had to be like a size 6 or 8 on the filling form, right? So it was like, I'm never going to get a job there because I'm not good enough, because my body doesn't fit that shape. So really starting to, often we look at, our family and the other adults in our lives, but our culture has a huge, huge impact on us. So just thinking about what was the motivation behind movement for you, specifically now coming into those teenage years. Um, and then what was the imprint or the belief system? I'm using Lael's words when I say imprint. What was the belief system around how often you needed to move? And I see this as a big, big one, especially for those of us that are cyclic. So when I say cyclic, I mean that we're bleeding. And when we're not cyclic, understanding that we're in big stages that require a lot of capacity. So pregnancy, postpartum, and then perimenopause, they're all quite take stages, right? Like that pre-bleed stage where we really need extra nourishment and nurturing. And then menopause is like a big bleed, a really, really big bleed if you're there. And so, were you taught about meeting your body's needs, or was your message around consistency 7 days a week, where you must work out 5 days and do 45 minutes? So much of the exercise I grew up with was 60-minute classes, and I always did two. I always had to do two classes back to back. This was pre-kids, obviously, but that was considered enough. For me, I don't know where I got that definition from. And this is where we start to go, what are my belief systems now, and where have they come from? So I often see with women, we fall off the bandwagon. I just want to say there's no bandwagon. We don't fall off it. We move in and out fluidly. When we're in our true feminine state, we're fluid. We're not consistent. We're not linear. And so you may have a real linear expectation of you exercising, and you may be able to meet that. And if you are, epic. Often we need to meet that when we are competitively training, or we're training for competitive sport. If you're not here training for competitive sport, and I don't think anyone would be, because they've got their own coaches, right? They're not going to turn up to my session. But if you're not doing that, I really want to invite you to redefine your definition of consistency. Because for me, being consistent is meeting my body's needs consistently, not meeting some unrealistic expectation that a combination of myself and society has deemed as appropriate. So knowing with our cycle that we're all unique as our bleeds are, typically during our bleed, we're going to want more gentle stuff like breath work, stretching. During from bleed to ovulation, we're in a real do stage. And I just really want to highlight here, that is the hardest part of my cycle, do. From when I stop bleeding to when I ovulate, that's actually the part I find the most challenging, because I'm like, everybody get the out of my way. I've got to do. Like, and in terms of my relationship with my partner, it's the hardest bit too, because I'm like, everybody move, move. This ship's got to like sail really fast. And so that's our high energy movement that we often want to meet. And so meeting that high energy movement can often help with the overwhelm that we feel at that time, because that do energy can feel very overwhelming if we're not meeting it properly. From egg dropping to that stage, premenstrual stage, that's the give. And that can be that time to really, we still want to move, but we sometimes want to socially connect more, and it's not as high energy. And then before we bleed, that can sometimes be good for the mum rage sessions and things like that, but really releasing in that session there, in that period there. So that was a really quick rundown of our cycle. And if you want to learn more about it, we sell this book on both of my businesses. It's incredible. It's super easy to understand. It's just epic, really, really epic. It's by Lucy Peach. And we're going to release a blog this week on this topic over at My Bleeding Days. So it'll be run down a little bit more. But I think what happens to many of us is we have this linear approach to planning our exercise and thinking what we need to do in terms of exercise. And that's actually not going to be realistic for many of us. And so inviting you to redefine it, because falling off the bandwagon, what we often make that mean is that we're failing, we're not good enough, and we quit, right? And so we see that re-entry onto the bandwagon as too hard, because to do that, we have to meet with all the shame that we have put on ourselves around why we weren't good enough to keep going. So really, really want to invite you to get rid of the bandwagon, to get rid of that linear expectation of exercise, and know that it's okay to turn up however you want. And what that might mean is, if you're having a really good month, you might move your body 4 times in 1 week in one part of the cycle, 2 times in another, 1 in another, and 5 in the next. And that's your version of consistency. If the month is full and really packed, and your patterning is to desert yourself when times get hard, which many of us will, and I'll talk about that in a second, once a week may be your consistency for that. knowing that it's constantly going to ebb and flow, and to bring so much compassion to yourself and give yourself a break, right? Just actually give yourself a break. There's no right or wrong way to show up to movement. And the best way we can show up to movement is to try and find out joy in it. I'm going to talk about that next. So it's the value in appearance part here is really, really important for you to understand that the research around marketing for exercise programs shows that the majority of people commence exercise or sign up to exercise because of how they look. The reason people stay is because of how exercise makes them feel. So what we see here is that social conditioning that we've had to value our appearance, but actually what exercise really gives us, which is joy. And that's what keeps people moving. So I never use before or after photos purely to get you to exercise. I don't. It doesn't align with my philosophy. It's not the best business move. I would get far more of you signing up if I used it, hands down. But it doesn't align with what we do here because we value function over appearance. And I've been true to that since we started. Sometimes there's been a few cases where I've shared pictures, but it's always the story that has meant more than the photos. And what often you see in photos is things like postural changes, which in terms of core and pelvic floor function is imperative. So really understanding when the body's out of alignment, our body cannot function in the way it's meant to, especially that core and pelvic floor. They get really impacted. Okay, so that's that kind of looking at what our belief systems around exercise are. And I want to move next into the stories that we have around getting our needs met. This is a big one that I normally spend about 2 hours on in the Modern Mum Village because it's huge for women and mothers especially. Most of us have a huge belief system that if we meet our needs, that we are lazy, incapable, not coping, and that we need to feel guilty over it. And it comes from not witnessing women in our lives taking up space, being seen, being heard, and feeling worthy enough of getting their needs met. It's massive, absolutely huge. And I think it's the source of so many of the things that we feel, from guilt and rage to depression and anxiety. If we can't put our needs first, then our whole family is out of balance because the holder, the person at the center, which is you, is off balance. And then nothing else can come into balance until we are. And this is where centering ourselves and seeing our value in our family unit and realizing our importance and how when we are off, everything is off. And when we are in balance, everyone else falls into balance much more easily, is where we can really start to align and give ourselves what we need. I feel zero guilt for getting my needs met, zero, because I see the beautiful flow-on effects for my family. So inviting you here to think about, what do we actually think and feel around getting our needs met? What do you think about it? How do you actually feel? So I want to invite you just for a second here, if you can, if it's safe for you, to close your eyes and actually feel into your body. So if you were to close your eyes and think about you going to do something that you love, whatever it is, how does that feel? What can you physically feel here? So perhaps there's joy at the start, there's excitement, and then there might be guilt or frustration that you can't, or fear, restriction. Maybe there's complete trust. And just thinking about what that physically feels like in your body. Does it make your belly churn? Does it make your chest tighten? Is there a lump in your throat from not being able to speak your needs? Does it feel shaky? Does it feel really open and light? And this is where we can get a lot deeper and start to understand, what is our body holding around this? And this is where we start to see why we actually aren't doing things for ourselves because it feels so unsafe for our body to do so. And there's a whole lot of body memory here. And the body memory typically comes from what we've experienced in our lifetime and what we've witnessed. So, inviting you here to think about growing up, were you encouraged or praised for doing what you wanted? I'm laughing because it's just like never, never, ever encouraged or praised for doing what felt good for me, let alone encouraged to drop into my body and go, does that feel good for you? I love that you can do something that feels good for you. How does that feel when you do that? Do you want to do more of it? Um, so, you know, in terms of, yeah, were you praised for what felt good for you, or were you praised for being good? Were you praised for doing things like cleaning your room, tidying up the house, cleaning on a Saturday with your mum? That was my thing. Mum always got really upset if I didn't want to spend my whole Saturday cleaning with her. For many of us, along with our appearance, our worth is also wrapped up in our productivity. And this can often stem from those little comments of thank you so much for unpacking the dishwasher, or no, you're not going out until your room is clean. Or, just that whole, all the shoulds. Why didn't you do this? You should have done that. You should have done this. You should have done that. And so, knowing that we're not good enough because those shoulds didn't get completed. And I really want to invite you to be really fully aware of when you're using the word should and see if you can place it with could. Oh, I should do the washing up rather than an exercise. I could do the washing up, or I could do some exercise. I could cook dinner right now and have it all prepped, and then everyone will be, everything will be easy this afternoon, or I could exercise, right? And that one, there is so much fear around not getting everything done because then we will get in trouble. And who are we going to get in trouble off? Often it's ourselves, right? Often it's that own self-blame and self-criticism that comes in. And there's no one else. We're an adult now. But what is happening to us in those moments is those younger versions of ourselves that were only praised for when we did something that felt good for somebody else come into play, right? Those younger versions of us that are scared that we haven't done enough or we haven't done things properly. We're going to get in trouble because we didn't clean up good enough or we made a mess. All of that starts to play. And what we realize is that we're parenting our children, we're mothering our children from a younger child version of ourselves that's actually really scared and worried about what everyone else is going to think. And that's a normal thing for a child to feel. That's attachment, right? That's safety. And that's how we sought our safety. And so we're still trying to do that now. And that is why we will place so much value on getting shit done rather than doing something that feels good for ourselves. Because, yeah, I hear you. So many women will say, I just needed to cook dinner and then the afternoon will run smoothly. Well, how smoothly would the afternoon run if you got to have your own needs met and that felt really good for you? And then you had more capacity to actually cook dinner with your kids and do that with them. And then what does that teach them? Right. So, something I really want to share with you quickly. Some of you who have done some stuff with me will know this well, and others won't. I'm just going to read the comments now. Um, my mother seemed to view exercise as a punishment for herself. Yeah, huge, huge, huge piece there for many of us. My mum never exercised. She allowed us to with sports, but it was always on her terms. Hashtag thigh gap. Oh my God, I forgot about the thigh gap. The interesting thing there with that, Jess, is what we often grow up with is it's okay for children to exercise and it's not okay for parents. So exercise is something kids do, sport is something kids do, and parents don't. That can be a real belief system that we can be holding. For others, it won't be there. There was no focus for us on frequency or what you had to do. However, there wasn't ever any education as a teenager around feeling differently at different stages of our cycle. I think it's something that most women are starting to learn now. Most of us in our 30s, it's like, where was this? Even I was like, hold up. How did I just get through the last like 30? I was probably 36 and I really came across it. 36 years. feel a bit sick. Well, I'm not sure what that's about, Melanie, but just sending you love there. Okay, so I just want to share this. Hang on a second. Oh, if I do that, and I go to here, give me a second here while I share this. Okay, so what I'm about to share with you is something called the polyvagal theory. Some of you will know it really well. This was developed by a guy called Stephen Porges in 1992, and people have adapted to it since. So I'm just going to start. Can everyone see that green part of the screen here? Yeah? Okay. So this is going to be the quickest rundown on the polyvagal theory you've ever experienced. But this green state here, this is when we're like, I may do something, I may not do something. This is where we feel grounded, connected. This is where we feel joy. This is where we feel completely present. We're curious, we're open, wonder what this means. We've got compassion, we're mindful, we feel safe. Right. And you can see on this side, we have all these increases to things like digestion, immune response, rest and recuperation, circulation to things like our skin, nails. This is oxytocin. This is the place we're meant to mother um, and birth and be pregnant and postpartum. This is the space we're meant to be in, right? As you can see here, you've got this beautiful little line because we're actually not meant to stay in this state all the time. We're meant to dip in and dip out. We are meant to have some stresses in our lives, and we're meant to be able to meet with them and then come back. Stress and come back, stress and come back. I would say the majority of mothers in today's society, that squiggly line is here, going between complete overwhelm and I can't into, and this says I can because we're still in a state of nervous system state where we can do things, but I like to call this state I should. So we're in this helplessness, overwhelm into fight or flight, helplessness, overwhelm into people pleasing, helplessness, overwhelm into, oh, I should do this, I should do that. And so this squiggly line really lives up here for many of us, right? So this middle section here is where we're in that real sympathetic nervous system state and we're in flight, fight, and I would put fawn in here. So fawn is that people pleasing state that need to be good, the good girl syndrome. Fight is our want to move towards something. So some of you will be fighters. That's the rage, the anger, the irritation, the frustration. Many of you will have flight as your predominant pattern, and that's that move away, suppress, anxiety, worry, concern. Understanding that this is that hyper arousal, right? So we really come out of our body and we spiral up. And then the fawn is the inability to say no, hold boundaries, things like that. And so in this state, we have real decrease in immune response and all that blood flow to non-vital organs. And so this theory is now coming into Western medicine a lot more and helping us to understand things like endo, constipation, skin outbreaks, everything, right? We can really, from the way the body physically experiences things, start to understand the nervous system impact behind it. And then this is our freeze, flop, flood. It's that complete overwhelm, right? State of shame, shutdown, hopelessness. And this preparation for death is super important when we think about movement and exercise. So, failure to move our bodies, right, really was equal to something was really wrong in our environment, right? So, from a real biological understanding, really thinking about how long humans have occupied this planet and thinking about us at the whole spectrum. When we don't move our bodies, that is our mind and body's awareness that something is really, really wrong. And so, what the body will do will retreat and sleep to recover. If that doesn't work, there is an assumption there somatically. So soma just means body. So there's a real body understanding and really important here to understand that our prefrontal cortex, that cognitive ability is an understanding is very different to the way the body understands things. So there's this assumption that we're going to die soon from a body's point of view. And so this is where unconsciously really unconsciously, understanding that this isn't a subconscious thought, this is unconscious, we're starting to begin to act like we are preparing for death. And so this is where we have social isolation, succumbing to fatigue, that real withdrawal. Sounds like depression, doesn't it? Right? Our body expects us to respond to psychological stress with movement. Now, this doesn't make sense to us on a cognitive level because when I'm got a problem in my head, going for a run isn't going to solve that problem in my head. But from a body state, it does because you're flighting, right? Or doing an exercise session where you're really moving your body forwards, that's fighting. So the body's needs are met in terms of the body feels like it has that condition under control. So whilst it's not a cognitive solution, it's what neurobiology does, and it's worked for humans for hundreds of thousands of years. And so this is where it's just that happening in that body. Our neurobiology wants this. So when we fail to move post-stressful situation, right, and animals don't do this. This is where a lot of somatic experiencing and courses are based on understanding that animals don't get things like PTSD after being attacked by or nearly being attacked by an animal, because their bodies are able to meet their nervous systems where they need to be. So when we fail to move post-stressor, our internal world gets really confused, really, really afraid, and gets really, really stuck. This sounds like anxiety, right? And so we start to understand from a body point of view, and I'm guilty of this. We often talk about, let's move to get those endorphins. It is so much deeper on a neurological and somatic point of view. It's so much deeper than that. Yes, the endorphins are like a little epic side reward, but what you're doing here is actually allowing your body to feel safe again. So our nervous system is connected to our skeletal muscles, and a low muscle tone is actually a signal of danger and vulnerability. So this is where we get a lot of hypervigilance and hopelessness. And this is where we actually understand that movement is so connected to how we feel internally and then what we project externally. So that was there was a lot of big topics in there, a lot of really big stuff that I'm meeting in a very small amount of time. But I want to invite you here to really think about, if you can, what do you actually want for yourself, right? What do you want for yourself first? See if you can answer that. And then what I want to invite you to look at is, what do you want to model to your children around movement and self-care? So yeah, Michelle, I'm going to put the questions down underneath the recording so that you can answer them and come back to them whenever you want. The polyvagal theory and all you've just told us around it is blowing my mind. Yeah, this stuff. This is where my passion for exercise comes from, especially in terms of motherhood, because so much of what we're feeling actually can be met and moved with movement, right? So much of this internal catastrophizing, this internal chaos that we feel can somatically, I'm not talking about cognitively, there's a lot more that we do to pull in support, but it's why when people go for a run, they go, I feel better. You've just given your body the flight to respond to the stress that it's been feeling. Our body doesn't know the difference between an inbox full of emails, the dishes piled up on the sink, and our kids screaming at us for another snack, and a saber-toothed tiger. The body does not differentiate that. So one of the biggest things I talk about in the Modern Mum Village is to see your tigers, Know what your tigers are in your life. What are your modern tigers? What triggers you somatically? What triggers your body? And then knowing, okay, that's just happened to me. That's a tiger, right? So being home alone in the kitchen with my two kids, there's massive tigers around me in that situation. So that is where a dance party in that moment, when I'm starting to feel it, and this is about that deep connection with body. How does this feel? Okay, I know that this is me starting to get triggered, starting before it ends up in that rage um, point. And I know sometimes it feels like we go from 0 to 100, but you haven't. You've gone from 0 to 10 in the morning, from 10 to 20 at morning tea time, from 20 to 30 at lunchtime. It has built until it feels like it's 0 to 100. It's just that so many of us are so disconnected from our bodies because we're in survival mode. So many of us are just in survival mode. And so to come out of that, somatically, what the body needs is movement. And this is where I'm so passionate about us as women moving, because it's the number one thing we can do to connect to our body and restore balance from a nervous system point of view. We're not evolving anymore if your definition of evolve is progress and health. We are the sickest we've ever been. We're the most disconnected we've ever been. We are fully dense in our energy. We're unable to be penetrated like we used to. Our connection to other humans, to earth, and to animals is being depleted, and we are getting more and more sick because of it. Yeah, our brains are becoming unwell, our bodies are becoming unwell, and the number one thing we can do is move. It's our chance of not just survival, but of joy, and really shifting how we are as humans and how we connect. And so it's the number one thing we can do in motherhood to feel safe again, to come back and be grounded and connected. So if we look back at that polyvagal chart, it had this, arch where we go into that stress state. We need to know what brings us back down, what brings us into calm and connection. Movement. Movement is the number one thing by all research that does that. And then for the brain, so for those of us that are women that are getting older, it decreases our chance of dementia. It decreases all the issues that we have with our bones as we get older as well. It really is the number one thing. And there's so much now around hormone replacement therapy, especially for perimenopause. There's this incredible woman that I follow, and she's like, none of the research is showing that we should be taking it as a prophylactic for dementia. But you know what is supported? Exercise, right? And so here, I really want you to define what your definition of exercise is, because for so many of us, the definition is huffy and puffy, sweating, feeling sore the next day, exerting ourselves in a way that we want to be sick, right? Exercise can be connecting to your breath and just allowing your body to expand. Exercise can be a 3 minute yoga pose, holding child's pose. Exercise can be a dance party. It can be going for a walk around your block at night once the kids are in sleep, someone else is home, and you just do a blockie. It doesn't have to be this massive thing that we've been marketed that it needs to be. It just needs to be what you need it to be. So what do you want? It's why we do such short classes. It's why the recordings are there. And so many people won't turn on a 15-minute recording if they've only got 7 minutes, because of that mental block that we have to do it all. We have to complete it. That's the good girl part in us, right? We can't be badass enough to go, I'm going to turn up to a 15-minute session and I'm only going to do 6 minutes, and I'm going to let myself feel good for it. No, we punish ourselves for not doing the full amount, right? So really inviting you to be super curious. What are the stories playing out for you? Why can't you do it? What is stopping you? What are the barriers? What are you telling yourself around, well, that's not enough exercise if I only do 6 minutes? And I say 5 minutes is better than no minutes, because it literally is, especially from a nervous system point of view. You are meeting a stress. So if you've just had something stressful happen and you meet it with a couple of minutes of exercise, that is the nervous system being met adequately. When an animal gets attacked, it runs away and makes itself safe. It doesn't run away and then keep running away for a really long time. actually what our body needs is probably a lot less than you think it does, right? So really, really want to invite you there to start seeing the tigers and then start noticing. So something I love to do is make myself third person and just witness. What am I thinking about this? What am I making this mean? What am I allowing myself to believe? Oh, I'm actually telling myself that I can't turn on a 15-minute session and only do 6 minutes because then I would have failed and I'm not good enough. And I'd punish myself for not doing the rest of the 9 minutes. What could you tell yourself instead? What would feel better for you to hear? And what would you want to tell your kids? And often when I get stuck, because that compassion piece can feel hard on us, because most of us will not allow ourselves to be compassionate to ourselves because we believe then that we are vulnerable and weak. So for many years, I couldn't be compassionate to myself because then I thought I'd just be letting myself off the hook. Then I'd become really lazy. Then I'd be a lovo. I'd never achieve anything if I was kind to myself. I must be really hard to myself all the time because that's when I achieve things and I feel good when I achieve things. Guess what? That didn't serve me, and it really didn't serve me in motherhood. It actually sent me down a horrible, horrible, horrible path that was devastating for my whole family. So the compassion piece really comes in massively with this. Right. So what do you actually want for yourselves? What do you want to model to your children around movement and self-care? And what is holding you back? And how can we start to shift that? How can we get our needs met? How can you mother yourself? How can you bring the same energy to you as you do to your children? And what would happen if you did? Because we're putting our energy all the wrong way. I just want to say that now. Like we're given all to them. But if we give to us, it naturally gives to them. I've learnt that. I learnt that the hard way. When my needs are met, their needs get met very easily. But if all I'm doing is this, then I'm doing this in a really, really shitty, resentful way where no one's actually getting their needs met. So, what stories need to shift? What do you need to hear? So, if you've been able to meet with some belief systems today, I want to invite you to now rewrite them. So if your belief system is something along the lines of, if I meet my needs, then I'm a bad mother and people won't think that I'm coping. What do you need to hear instead? Right? So maybe you need to hear something like, I am safe to meet my needs and not feel any guilt. I am safe to know that when I meet my needs, everybody else's needs will get met. Something that lands for you, right? I can move my body in a way that feels good for me. I'm going to move my body to feel joy, and then everybody else gets to feel joy. I really love mantras or affirmations that come from here. Something that when you say it, you go, oh, yeah, that's what I need to hear. Like your whole body's like, yes, 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 that. Tell me that. Tell me that over and over and over again. And when we start to rewrite our stories, when we start to rewrite our our belief systems, it doesn't come easy. They actually feel really untrue. They can also feel really scary. And the brain starts to go, no, 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 that's not true. It's not true. No, 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 no. The brain really likes to try and keep us safe and pulls us back into what we think we know, right? Because that was our safety. And so this is where we really have to differentiate and go, thank you, brain. Thank you for trying to keep me safe. That's not the stories we're going to roll with anymore. Right. And so it's this constant conversation and it's this constant just slowly dipping our toe in. We dip our toe in and we start to find the evidence of, oh my goodness, it really was safe for me to go for that walk, dinner, bath, and bedtime, and for my partner to take over here. Or it really was okay. I felt so much better going into the night, even though everyone had big feelings. I had the capacity to hold those big feelings because my nervous system was safe. So when I moved my body, my nervous system went from a state of unsafe into safety. And then I was able to hold everyone else's unsafe nervous system because of that. So it really is start off small. Maybe you just want to show yourself that you can meet your needs for 2 minutes. And then it grows and it grows and it grows. And this is how we reparent ourselves. This is how we unlearn everything that we've been taught that no longer serves us. It's a freaking process, right? It doesn't happen overnight. Some things shift quickly, others don't. Sometimes things shift and we're rewriting that belief system and we're on a roll and this is feeling amazing. And then something happens and we feel like we come crashing down. And then come back and listen to this, right? And you will start again, but you're not starting at the bottom. You've already built that capacity for it. When I work with people and they bring in a new belief system, I get them to repeat it a couple of times. And it's phenomenal what happens in the body from when they first say it to when they say it for like the fourth or fifth time. They feel the shift in their body. The fear starts to fade and they're like, oh, okay, I can take this new belief system on. Then I really want to invite you to lean into the triggers when it doesn't feel like it's working, when it doesn't feel like you're getting evidence. There will always be evidence for the old belief system, always. But what we tend to do, and what the prefrontal cortex likes to do, is focus on that evidence and not see the other evidence. And that is because this evidence that proves our old belief systems feels safe to us. Even if it's hellish, even if it doesn't serve us, we love familiar. We don't like foreign. Foreign is too scary. And there's a story I tell all the time in the Modern Mum Village around a fly. You're at a cafe, in a cafe, and it's glass, and there's glass sliding doors, but this fly is going at this glass window as hard as it possibly can. It's flying, flying, flying faster and faster, and using all of its energy, and actually moving closer and closer to death by doing the same thing over and over again, because that feels safe. Not knowing that if it just moved back a little bit and flew that way, 10 meters, it would have freedom. But it doesn't know that. It doesn't know whether it has to fly this way or that way or that way or up or down. And all of the rest of the path feels way too scary. And so it keeps doing the same thing over and over again until it dies. Nothing changes if nothing changes. So really want to invite you today, are you flying at that window harder and harder and harder? And is it serving you? And if it isn't, which new direction do you need to take? And I just want to say, you might go that way and freedom might be this way. And so it feels scary and it doesn't work out for you. And that's okay. You tried. And then we shift and readjust. Sometimes we go to the contrast. I've really learned in my life to accept when I'm in the contrast. Okay, I'm in the contrast. This isn't where I want to be. Okay, what needs to shift now so that I can move into what I do want? And I'm grateful for the contrast because it gives me that beautiful opportunity to go, this isn't what I want, actually. That's what I want instead. So invite you to define what consistency means to you, inviting you to go, what would your ideal look like? So really inviting you to dream big here. What would your ideal look like in terms of exercise? Fantasize, dream big, and then go, what's stopping me from getting that? And then allow it to be a little bit more realistic, right? So why we dream big first is to actually understand what is keeping us back, what stories are keeping us back, and then start to problem solve and go, right, what can I actually do? What would feel good? Start small, start really small. All right. So we're at time, which I never do. I normally go for like 6 hours. Sometimes it's hard to get out of thinking that self-care feels very selfish, which is why I think what you are telling us here is a good wake-up call for me. Okay, Joyce, what I want to say to you there is what would happen in your body and then what would happen in your family if you got your needs met. When I benefit, everyone in my family benefits. When I am not feeling good, everyone in my family gets impacted. Everyone, my kids especially, they don't feel safe if I don't feel safe in my body. So I really want to invite you to go, who gave you that definition that self-care is selfish? What does it need to change to and why? Right? And just knowing, I know for me that when I do things for me, I come back yesterday, I went for like 6 hours. I went and drove 1 hour in each direction and then had a 3 hour session. So I was gone for 5, but I stopped for lunch as well because I was like, I'm hungry, I need food. So I was gone for like 6 hours. I came back and I was the best friggin' mum I'd been in a long time. I was nailing it. We were so connected. We had the best afternoon as a family. Everyone was in balance. We started this week off in balance, right? So self-care, my definition of self-care is getting our needs met to be able to be in balance. And when we're in balance, everybody else shifts. Often our kids are out of balance because we are. They are just the barometers. They are the beacons showing us what we're not allowing ourselves to see. And I really want to invite you to think, what do you want your children to think about when they're parents? Do you want them to think that self-care is selfish? Big love, honey. Big love. I know it. This piece was mine too, right? I'm speaking from a lot of experience here, 100%. And it still comes in every now and again. I want to be really authentic and true there. I often find it hard to leave the kids with my partner because he doesn't meet his needs and gets overwhelmed himself. Yeah, that is a huge, huge point because our our partners often bring the parent wounds. And so we feel very deeply unsafe when our partners have big feelings, just like we felt very deeply unsafe when our parents had big feelings, right? It goes hand in hand. Partners often bring up the parent wounds. And so it can feel very uncomfortable for us when our partners are overwhelmed or frustrated and all the rest of it. It takes a lot. I really want to invite you to come to the Modern Mum Village because it's a big one. It's a big one to shift, but it has to shift somewhere. Nothing changes if nothing changes, right? So what if you go and get your needs met, what happens then when you come home? Who are you then? Are you then able to hold your partner's feelings and not make them wrong for how they're feeling and not make them wrong for not getting their needs met? And actually just go, I see you. I see that you feel really overwhelmed. Yeah, it's big for you, right? We're trying to hold space for our kiddos all the time. Actually, the best thing we can do is hold space for our partners because then our kiddos get to witness that. But often we're going to our kids, it's okay for you guys to have feelings, but it's not okay for dad, mummy to have feelings. Totally guilty of that. Just like owning that right here. It's been the hardest piece for me to shift. I really want to say that. The hardest. It's tied into our safety. I want to feel less like exercise has to have a specific outcome and remember that movement is medicine. I want to feel space in my body and mind instead of overwhelmed and incapable. Yes to you, honey. Yes to you. Celebrating that. How? How are you going to do it? So we can identify what our wants are and then we need to know how. All right. Lots of information. Thank you for soaking it up. You will have this to come back to and rewatch and answer any of the time. So, for those of you that don't know, we do who here is part of our $15 a month online classes? You, Corinne is, Carly is. Not sure. I can't see anyone else. Fun is. So, for those that don't know, $15 a month. Live and recorded. There's over 1,000 recordings in there now. We're going to be doing fortnightly education sessions too. But I just want to know if the team is on, and if they are, can they put their cameras on? Pretty please. Chelsea is. So Chelsea, so Emily, can you make us a bit bigger and maybe spotlight Chelsea and I and Julia? So Chelsea is a chiro from Victoria and she runs, do you want to say hi and just tell us what classes you run? And then if you can spotlight Julia, perfect.
Cool. Hi,
Hi.
everyone. I'm Chelsea. I'm a chiro from Victoria, Geelong specifically. I'm also a Pilates instructor. So with core and floor live classes, I run Pilates Fusion on a Wednesday morning, which is a slightly gentler class, almost exclusively floor-based, sort of an introduction to a lot of the classic Pilates moves that you may or may not be familiar with. And I also run Power Pilates on a Thursday and a Saturday morning, which can be a little bit stronger. It's up to you how strong you like to make it. You do you. But it often has some, stronger options for you to make it a more challenging class, but also to just come and meet us on the mat and have a bit of fun and a bit of a play with your body.
Yeah, epic. And then we've got Nat. She's a physio in Sydney. She runs our Power and Sweat, Pregnancy Strengthen, Lengthen classes, Connection classes. She couldn't be here today. We also have Alice who runs our yoga, and then Julia, who's in New Zealand, who's an engineer and has a brilliant engineer mind, especially when it comes to the body. She runs our breathwork and our pregnancy nourishment. She's a yoga and Pilates instructor. So she's going to get us started. Is that all right? You able to get us started? We're just gonna do 5 minutes here. So Julia's gonna get us started with the breath work. Chelsea's gonna do some bridges. I'm gonna do Chelsea, can you do 2 exercises? And we'll take it back to Julia and we'll finish with some squats. All right, so just a minute, Julia, go for it.
Awesome. Cool. So if you find yourself in a comfy position, I'm gonna recommend lying, but whatever feels good for you. So it might be seated, finding wherever you are enough support that your spine can be long. So if you're seated, it might be a rolled up cushion or something underneath your bottom. If you're lying down, feet flat to the floor, knees bent up towards the ceiling, can feel really lush. And just take a little moment to land in your body, to let go of the day, to let go. Just closing the door so you can't hear the washing machine, to let go of the day and drop into your 5 senses. So it might be that you are noticing sounds around you, the sound of my voice. Maybe it's the sound of your breath. Can you hear that little whisper of breath as it moves in past the top lip? And then as it leaves. Perhaps noticing the felt sensation of your breath. Where in your body can you feel moving? It might be the gentle rise and fall of your chest, of your belly. It might be the ribs swinging out to the sides of the room. You could even bring your hands onto the sides of your ribs and feel as they expand out towards the inner seams of your arms. Maybe you can feel some really gentle movement down towards the earth if you're lying down, or back behind you towards bra strap area as the lungs fill towards the back body. I invite you to imagine in your mind's eye what's happening with your breath as you breathe. We've got this beautiful big muscle called the respiratory diaphragm, which sits in the base of the rib cage. And as we inhale, this diaphragm, this big sheet of muscle, dives down into the belly, displacing all of our abdominal organs. So all of those beautiful organs are moving down into the abdominal cavity, which causes the belly to rise. And it also requires the pelvic diaphragm or the pelvic floor muscles to let go, to release. So perhaps you can imagine these 2 diaphragms, the pelvic diaphragm or the pelvic floor muscles and the respiratory diaphragm, like little synchronized swimming jellyfish. And as you inhale, they gently bloom down into your belly, into your pelvis, softening. And then as you exhale, they gently recoil, they lift gently into the body to expel the air. You might be able to feel the pelvic floor releasing as a sensation of the sit bones spreading away from one another, or the tailbone dropping, or it might be that that's quite abstract to you and you don't feel that just yet. And if you're not feeling anything physically, know that your mind's eye, your imagination, your visualization is really powerful. Taking a few more rounds of breath, noticing where you feel the movement. Visualizing the movement that you might like to occur. Perhaps even noticing the length of the inhale in relation to the length of the exhale. When you feel ready, Theodore has decided you've had enough breath. You're going to move into your bridges. Take it away, Chelsea.
If you're not already on the floor and you've got the space wherever you are, making your way down onto your back, we'll bend up your knees and place your feet stacked about underneath your knees. Knees are about hip width apart, but that can change depending on your body. Let's start with a little tuck and an untuck of your pelvis. So that will feel like sending your tailbone to your toes and pressing your low back into the ground. We get a little rounding through the low back. And then as you untuck, we get a little scoop as the back comes away from the ground. On your next one, can you send your tailbone to your toes and then start to roll your hips up towards the sky? We press down through the heels and the toes. Inhale at the top of your bridge and exhale, slowly roll all the way down. Nice and slow, perhaps melting your spine down, can even feel like a little massage along the length of your back. Let's take one more like that. You roll all the way up, just to the point where you can hold that bridge position. You're feeling your glutes engage, perhaps you're squeezing your butt together. Let's stay at the top here for just a moment. Take an inhale, and then exhale, lower a little faster, tap to the ground and drive back up to your bridge position. We lower down and lift. Really inviting you, as we add in just a couple of layers, to find the one that suits you. Come with us to each layer, or find one that feels good for your body and stay there. This being your first or second layer, you can stay with those rolls up and down. Let's lift to the top, hold it up in 3, 2, hold at the top of your bridge and start to find just little pulses. So if right at the top of your range, and we take a tiny extra squeeze of your butt to lift for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold at the top, just staying lifted, squeezing your butt, maybe feeling that burn start to build through your glutes for 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Lower all the way down. Hug your knees into your chest. That can be nice and wide, or it can be nice and close together. And then bringing your feet onto the floor, let's come through just a little core activation. We start with reverse toe taps. So bringing one knee up to a 90-degree position and placing it back down. That knee coming just over your hips and then back down to the ground. Once again, we've got a few layers here, and I invite you to just find the one that suits you. So this is our first one. See how that feels for you. If you'd like to come with us to the next one, you bring both legs up together, tap down and lift. So we've reset our base position. Our starting position is now in what we call tabletop, with knees over hips and feet roughly in line with your knees. We feel this a lot stronger through your core, so we really feel that engagement wrapping from the back all the way around to the front. And you'll feel the tension increase as your toes tap down, remembering you can always come back to that previous version where we engage the core to lift, but we're in a more supported position with feet starting on the floor. We'll just go for 10 seconds here, and then we'll pass back to B. For 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Well done. Feet come to the ground. Take a little wriggle and a breath.
Beautiful job, team. Thanks, Chelsea and Julia. Coming up to standing now, so rolling over onto the side, bringing our feet up, taking the heel to the ground, and then the other foot coming up to standing. We're going to do just a little bit of squatting here. So if you need a bit of support with your squats, you can take a ball, chuck it on the wall, and use that as a bit of support to come down and up. Remember that a squat, this is a squat, and this is a squat. Anything in between is a squat. Everything you do is perfect. We can also do our squats using a chair. So we can sit down, come to our chair. We exhale. As we exhale, we want to use that breath that we started with Julia, where everything comes up with us. We inhale and move back down. Exhale, so we can push ourselves up like that. Otherwise, what we're doing here is we've got our big toe, little toe, and heel on the ground. We inhale as we come down. We exhale as we come up, making sure that we bring that pelvis underneath us. So if you like to Instagram booty it, and you've got that really tight psoas from holding all the time because your nervous system is constantly holding, and that's our literal fight and flight muscles. So we did a psoas release today in the lengthen in the connection session. This is going to want to do that. Can you bring it under as you come down? And maybe what you realize is that shortens your range of movement for now, because what we want to do is use exercise to bring our body back into alignment. Alignment is where our core and pelvic floor can work best. And then we're just going to finish off with a bit of cardio. So feel free to put some music on and dance party it here. Otherwise, we're going to bring some high knees in here. So you might want to just jump it up, a little skip. You may have your feet flat and take the arms out of it. So easier option, feet flat, knees come up. Add those arms in to make it harder. Come up onto those tippy toes to make it even harder. If you want to, you start working across the body. So foot goes a hand goes to opposite foot. And if you want to jump it, you might want to do a little jump. And of course, you've got the option, if you want to run it out here. We're going to be here for just 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then we finish with our victory arms. Woo! We give ourselves a high five, a gorgeous little cuddle, and maybe a forehead kiss. And we tell ourselves something that we need to hear. And right there, you've got some evidence that 5 minutes is better than no minutes. And I love that people dropped off for the exercise session. And that's where we're at. I want to just say here one more thing. And what we forgot to talk about was what Lydia has beautifully said there about that Julia does cycle yoga. So she does yoga around our cycles. But the biggest comment that we get for people leaving our exercise classes is that they've got a lot going on and they're not finding the time for them. I want to see the biggest pattern I see is that when times get tough, the mother gets taken out. Yeah. So when the family unit gets hard and it feels hard and there's so much on, the first person to go, the first person's needs to not get met are the mothers. And I really want to invite you today to think about what the whole family unit would look like if when times got tough, the mother's needs got met, right? Because I get emails all the time. My partner's going away. I can't exercise this month. Oh, actually, what do we need more than anything? And how do we start to incorporate that, right? And it's by putting ourselves first. Whew. Thank you so much. If you need a reminder that you are worthy, we've got these for sale, just to really connect in. Because what lies at the bottom of all this, the reason we aren't moving our bodies is because we don't feel worthy enough in one way, shape, or form. We don't feel worthy to take up the space to move. We don't feel worthy to turn up. Whatever it is, the underlying message often comes down to our worth. So please know that you are worthy. Man, that's exactly why I stopped the monthly exercise videos. Yeah, it's the reason I did this today, because it's the only reason people ever give us. And it's the number one thing we need in that time is exercise. So number one thing is, I just don't have the time for it. I'll hopefully have the time later. Telling you right now, if you don't have the time for it now, you're not going to have the time later, because time doesn't change. What changes is our mindset and our belief about ourselves. So inviting you today to believe that you are worthy enough to take up the space, even if it's just 6 minutes of a 15-minute session. Thank you for being here. Thank you to the beautiful team who could come today. Emily, for supporting us in the background. We will post this in the live classes. We will also post it on YouTube so you can watch it. And we hope to see many of you in the sessions. We're going to be bringing a whole lot more to the $15 a month classes, including fortnightly education topics and support and being able to answer your questions. So thanks for being here. Big love. We hope we get to see you in a session soon. See ya. Oh, thanks, Carly. Lots of love to you. Oh, I love it. Awesome. I think do you want to stop recording?